Our next speaker is a Duluthian who values education and learning. She has experienced growth both personally and professionally through her work in the Office of Education Equity for Duluth Public Schools. When she's not at work, she enjoys being with her friends and family, supporting the interests of her 3 children, reading, and she's become a runner. With her story, the system was never broken, it was built that way. Please welcome Patty Paquette.
I want to start out by thanking Tammy for this opportunity, for asking me to be a part of this event. I really appreciate the opportunity, I appreciate you, and I appreciate our friendship. So thank you. What I'm going to share tonight is very personal for me, and it's been a long journey. So I just want to give you a heads up that some of the information I'm going to share may be information that you haven't heard before. And it could be difficult to hear, or it may take you some time to process, and that's completely okay. I think it's important, the things that I've included in here, and that's why I've chosen to include them with sharing my journey with all of you. I invite any and all of you to get in contact with me if you hear anything, hear something in my story that you'd like to discuss, because I'm always up for having a conversation with people. So my story starts in May of 2014, when my boss, William Howes, informed me that all of our staff in our department, which Tammy said, I was going to say what it was in case people didn't know, but she said, would be attending a workshop titled Undoing Racism. I was genuinely looking forward to it. I'm always eager to learn and thought this would be a great opportunity to get to know my coworkers and to learn tips on how to undo racism. I don't like racism, and I would like to be a part of undoing it. The reality is that I was not at all prepared for the intensity of the training, the impact that would have on my life, and for realizing how much I really did not know about racism and my own race. That training was the catalyst of a journey that I've been on for about 3 years now. I'd like to share with you some of the things that I've learned along the way. I've learned just like people of color do not choose the color of their skin and are constantly made to feel inferior for something they have no control over, I have a privilege as a white person, which is a color of skin that I didn't choose and a privilege I didn't ask for. I acknowledge it, I accept it, and it ignites a fire in me that I have to utilize to do something about racism. I have to be part of dismantling something that is harmful to the very existence of humanity. The problem with categorizing people by the color of their skin is they're not just categories. They've been used to imply a hierarchy born of nature. I learned that genetically speaking, humans have the least amount of genetic variation within their species. And the greatest variation actually occur within your own ethnic groups. So I could genetically be more similar to someone that is African American than to someone that is white. How can we continue to categorize people as to whether or not they can be successful solely based on something they have absolutely no control over, such as the color of their skin? I know a wide variety of people that would identify as many different races, and their culture, their skill sets, and the way they carry themselves, do their work, interact with others, etc., does not fit into a mold that society has deemed they fit into, determined by the classification of race. I learned that there is a difference between race and culture. Race is a social construct that someone else decided for us to keep us in a predetermined box. Culture is what you choose for yourself. It is your way of life, your beliefs, your traditions, and how you identify yourself. Until we started doing cultural sharing within our district, I didn't even realize I had a culture, because I thought culture was solely based on race and or ethnicity. I am grateful for this more fluid definition, as it lets me explore my identity of who I am and who I strive to be, and then I can share that with others. Everyone has culture, and by sharing and listening to cultures similar and different than our own, we begin to understand each other. I now understand when I was growing up, most of what I was taught was done from only one lens, a lens that went to great lengths to show my race as the good one, as the superior one. The narrative that was selected for us and deemed important was told by white males. I learned that as a country, we have so many secrets. And in the last few years, the secrets that I've learned of and that have been shown to me have changed me. I've learned of our government throughout history and still today creating programs and our policies to intentionally accelerate white people and oppress people of color. The examples I'm going to share with you now were omitted from my formal education. Have you heard of the GI Bill? Did anyone in your family receive benefits from the GI Bill for education or for buying a home? In the book Waking Up White and Finding Myself in the Story of Race by Debbie Irving, I learned that Americans of color, including the 1 million African American GIs who'd risked their lives in the war, were largely excluded from receiving these benefits. This was intentional. Though African American GIs were technically eligible for the bill's benefits, in reality, our higher education, finance, and housing systems made it difficult, if not impossible, for African American GIs to access them. Most colleges and universities used a quota system, limiting the number of African American students accepted each year. Due to those quotas, there were not enough African American seats available to allow in the 1 million returning African American GIs. The Federal Housing Authority had created a set of policies that were used to deny or limit financial services to certain neighborhoods based on racial or ethnic composition without regard to the residents' qualifications or creditworthiness. The author gives an example of an African American couple that found a home they wanted to purchase and approached a realtor to do so. They were told by the realtor that he couldn't sell to African Americans. The Federal Housing Authority had warned developers that even 1 or 2 non-white families could topple the kind of values necessary to profit from their enterprise. The GI Bill gave Americans the illusion that everyone was being rewarded for their service to our country, when in reality, many were intentionally omitted from reaping the benefits of the program to maintain the status quo. A couple of months ago, I had the opportunity to attend the UMD Equity Summit, where Debbie Irving, the author I mentioned earlier, was the keynote speaker. In her speech, she talked about Black Wall Street. Have any of you heard of Black Wall Street? Black Wall Street was a section of town in Tulsa, Oklahoma, referred to as Greenwood. This was a thriving community made of affluent African American people that included many African American owned businesses. Among these were churches, restaurants, grocery stores, movie theaters, a hospital, banks, a post office, libraries, schools, law offices, a half a dozen private airplanes, and even a bus system, all African American owned. In the summer of 1921, this community was bombed from the air, and businesses and homes were set on fire and burned to the ground. The attack was backed by the Ku Klux Klan, working along with high-ranking city officials. Some of the guns used in the attack were actually provided by local officers who also participated in the riot, and airplanes used in World War I were dispatched, firing rifles at residents and dropping firebombs. By the end, close to 300 African Americans were murdered, while many others were left injured, homeless, and held by law enforcement. Right now, to you, this may seem incomprehensible, but this actually happened. This is history that isn't talked about or taught in our schools. I want to thank Rebecca for sharing her story about Indian boarding schools, because that's my next section in here. But I was glad that you were able to hear about them from someone that has personal experience and knowledge about them. It's better than hearing it from me. But I will at least give a little bit of what I've learned about them in addition to what she shared. Through a training I attended one summer given by Edie House and Martha Lippitt, I learned about those schools for the first time. And like you said, Rebecca, they were created to force assimilation. Ways that I've heard of the story is many children were forcibly removed from their homes. Some children were given haircuts, regardless of the important meaning associated with not cutting their hair. They were not allowed to speak their own language, and they were expected to eradicate all their cultural beliefs. And corporal punishment was often used to get them to comply. The trauma that these families and children have been exposed to can still be seen today. It's the effects of historical trauma. There are grandparents to those of my generation that experienced these atrocities. Of course, that would have a lasting effect on today's generations. These stories have been passed down, and the trust of the government and schools is extremely diminished. Many people think these things occurred a long time ago and that they should get over it already, but these examples did not happen that long ago, and many of our government systems and policies still resemble the white as the norm while oppressing other ways of life, because those are the principles this country was built on. I've learned that we need to acknowledge our mistakes. We need to start the reconciliation and healing process for people of color and Indigenous people and their families, and validate their experiences. Misabakong, the Ojibwe immersion program within our school district, is one way of doing that, because in addition to all the educational and developmental benefits of immersing children in another language, it offers a small step to begin the reconciliation and healing process to those within our own community that are affected by the trauma of boarding schools, and also as a way to revitalize an endangered language that was spoken right here in this place. It's also a step in the right direction to build trust between the Indigenous population that live here in public schools, so families can start writing a different history and heal from their historical trauma, where their values and culture are accepted within government-run schools. We need to do more things like this, not only for Indigenous people, but for all people of color. This new knowledge has impacted my life in ways that I cannot put into words. I remember finding out secrets as a kid and how betrayed I felt knowing I'd been lied to, but this goes beyond that. We have to do better. We have to include multiple sides of the story. We need to stop covering up the lies. We need to offer reconciliation and healing to the groups of people we have injured. White people need to start realizing how, whether it's intentional or unintentional, their race contributes to this design of implied hierarchy, and it plays a role in the system of oppression. We need to become allies with people of color and Indigenous people for positive change and bring humanity back to everyone. I didn't ask for this knowledge. I wasn't even necessarily seeking it. I was ignorant. I didn't even know what I didn't know. But it came to me through opportunities that were offered, and I accepted, by researching and seeking knowledge on my own, by having conversations with those like me and different from me to gather different perspectives, by being comfortable even when things became uncomfortable, and by most importantly, learning about and getting to know myself. That's what I consider real-life learning, and it's fluid, ever-changing, and evolving. The knowledge I've acquired in the last 3 years has taken me on an amazing life-altering journey so far, and one I am still on. I look forward to the future and embracing more real-life learning opportunities, because who knows where they will lead me. Thank you.